r/relationship _ advice. My daughter treated me like the hired help until I proved my worth. My daughter treated me like the hired help until I proved my worth. Mom, just don't tell them what you do for work, okay? I froze with my coffee mug halfway to my lips, staring at my daughter Emma across our kitchen table. She was stabbing at her avocado toast like it had personally offended her, not making eye contact. Excuse me? You know what I mean. She finally looked up, her face flushed but determined. When you meet Derek's parents next weekend. Just, maybe don't mention the whole cleaning thing? The whole cleaning thing. That's what my 22-year-old daughter called the job that had put food on our table and paid her college tuition for the past 4 years. Emma. It's embarrassing, Mom. The words tumbled out in a rush. Derek's dad owns 3 car dealerships and his mom is on the board of like 5 charities. They're going to think I'm some charity case if they find out my mom scrubs toilets for a living. I set my mug down carefully, the ceramic clicking against the wooden table. I see. Look, I'll just tell them you work in property management or something. It's not technically a lie, right? You manage Mrs. Henderson's property every Tuesday and Thursday. Property management. I almost laughed at the irony. And what exactly do you plan to do when they ask follow-up questions about my property management career? Emma waved her hand dismissively. Rich people don't really care about details. They'll probably just nod and change the subject to something about themselves anyway. I watched my daughter, this young woman I'd raised, sacrificed for, worked 3 jobs to support, dismiss not just my profession but an entire class of people with such casual cruelty. When had she become this person? Emma, do you remember when you were 8 and I worked that catering job for the mayor's Christmas party? She sighed dramatically. Mom, I don't have time for a trip down memory lane. You were so proud to tell your teacher that your mommy made the fancy cookies all the important people were eating. You said I was the best cook in the whole city. I was 8, she snapped. I didn't understand how the world works yet. And how does the world work, exactly? Perception matters. Image matters. I'm trying to build a life here, and Derek's family has connections that could help my career. I can't have them thinking I come from what? Say it. Emma's face went red. From nothing, okay? From some poor family where mom has to clean other people's messes because she couldn't do better. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I studied my daughter's face, so much like mine at that age, but twisted with a disdain I'd never felt even during our hardest times. I see, I said again, my voice perfectly calm. So you want me to lie about who I am so your boyfriend's rich family doesn't think less of you? It's not lying, it's just strategic truth-telling. I stood up and walked to the sink, rinsing my mug with steady hands while my mind raced. Emma had no idea what she was asking. She had no idea about a lot of things, actually. Maybe it was time she learned. All right, I said, turning back to face her. I'll play along with your little story. Her face lit up. Really? Oh my God, Mom, thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise. They're going to love you. We'll see about that, I thought, but I just smiled. The week leading up to Derek's parents' visit, I watched Emma transform into someone I barely recognized. She deep-cleaned our already spotless house, hid the family photos that showed me in my work clothes, and even asked me to remove the small Employee of the Month certificate from my cleaning company that I'd proudly displayed on the refrigerator. It's just for the weekend, she said, rolling it up and shoving it into a drawer. You understand. I understood plenty. On Wednesday, she came home from shopping with bags from stores I knew she couldn't afford. Designer dress, new shoes, expensive makeup. When I asked how she paid for it all, she mumbled something about her credit card and disappeared into her room. Thursday evening, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was preparing dinner. So I've been thinking about your cover story, she said, pulling out her phone and showing me a notes app filled with bullet points. I told Derek you work in luxury property management. High-end residential properties. That explains why you have such good attention to detail and why you know so much about house maintenance. I stirred the pasta sauce and said nothing. I wrote down some key points you should mention if they ask. Like, you could say you oversee estate management for wealthy clients who travel frequently. That sounds sophisticated, right? Emma, exactly how much have you told Derek about our financial situation? She shifted uncomfortably. What do you mean? I mean, have you been lying to him about more than just my job? I haven't been lying exactly. She trailed off, which told me everything I needed to know. Emma. Okay, fine. Maybe I let him think we're more comfortable than we are. He pays for most of our dates anyway, and his parents are taking us out to dinner at Lou Bernardine on Saturday. Do you know how expensive that place is? Lou Bernardine. I knew it well, actually. I'd had several business dinners there over the past 2 years, but Emma didn't need to know that. Yet. What happens when they start asking deeper questions? What if Derek's father wants to talk business with me? He won't, Emma said confidently. Rich men like that don't really see women as business equals anyway. He'll probably just ask you a few polite questions and then talk to Derek about sports or whatever. The casual misogyny in her statement made my jaw clench, but I kept stirring. Besides, she continued, I told Derek you're kind of shy about work talk because you're, what's the word, discreet. You have to be confidential about your clients because they're celebrities and politicians and stuff. I set down the wooden spoon and turned to face her fully. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I had to. This is important to me, Mom. Derek is, he could be the one, you know? And his family's approval means everything to him. If they don't like me, or if they think I'm not good enough. She looked genuinely panicked. I can't lose him over something as stupid as what job you have. Something as stupid as what job I have. The job that paid for the roof over her head, the food she was too nervous to eat, the clothes on her back before she started maxing out credit cards to impress a boy. Don't worry, sweetheart, I said, turning back to the stove. I promise you, this weekend is going to be very educational for everyone involved. What do you mean by that? Nothing, honey. Just that we're all going to learn something about each other. Emma seemed satisfied with that answer and flounced off to her room to practice her fake stories. I finished making dinner and started planning exactly how I was going to handle Derek's parents. They had no idea what they were walking into. Friday evening, Emma was a bundle of nervous energy, pacing around the living room and adjusting throw pillows that didn't need adjusting. Remember, if they ask about your clients, just be vague and mysterious, she said for the 10th time. Rich people love exclusivity. I nodded from the kitchen where I was preparing appetizers, nothing too fancy, just some brie and fig jam on crostini. Emma had specifically requested I keep the food simple but elegant because apparently Derek's mother was very particular about catering. And Mom? Maybe wear the navy dress tomorrow? The one from Nordstrom? Emma bit her lip. It's just more professional looking than your usual. Than my usual what? You know. Your regular clothes. My regular clothes. The ones I wore to clean houses, apparently, weren't good enough for her boyfriend's family. Never mind that the navy dress she was referring to cost more than most people's monthly car payments. Emma had no idea how much I'd actually spent on my wardrobe over the past few years. Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you comfortable. She beamed at me, completely missing the edge in my voice. You're the best, Mom. I know this is weird, but after tomorrow night, everything will be normal again. Normal. As if lying about who I was constituted normal. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and saw it was from Richard Blackwell, Derek's father. Emma didn't know I had his number. Asterisk looking forward to finally meeting Emma's mother tomorrow. Derek speaks of you both so highly, asterisk. I typed back quickly, asterisk likewise, Richard. Should be an interesting evening, asterisk. Who's texting? Emma asked, craning her neck to see my phone. Just work, I said, slipping the phone into my pocket. A client confirming next week's schedule. Emma's face immediately scrunched up. Mom, please tell me you're not working on Monday. What if Derek's parents ask what you're doing next week? You can't say you're going to clean someone's house. I paused in my appetizer preparation. Emma, what exactly do you think is going to happen after this weekend? Do you plan to keep Derek away from me forever? Never mention my real job again? I don't know. I'll figure something out. Maybe by then it won't matter as much. Because you'll have secured your place in his family by then? That's not what I meant. But her face flushed, telling me it was exactly what she meant. I set down my knife and really looked at my daughter. When had she become so calculating? So desperate to be someone she wasn't? Emma, what if Derek's parents aren't the kind of people who would judge you based on your mother's job? What if you're assuming the worst about them? She laughed bitterly. Mom, you don't understand how these people think. Everything is about status and connections and who you know. Derek's told me stories about how his parents dropped friends because they found out the husband lost his job. They don't associate with people beneath their social level. And yet Derek is dating you, knowing you're not from their social level. That's different. Derek loves me. And anyway, he doesn't know how modest our situation really is. Modest. That was a new euphemism. Emma, have you considered that if Derek truly loves you, he'd accept you regardless of your background? And if his parents would reject you over something so superficial, maybe they're not the kind of people whose approval you should want. Emma's expression hardened. Easy for you to say. You've never had a chance at this kind of life. This is my opportunity to be part of something bigger, something better. I'm not going to let it slip away because of pride. The words hit like a slap. Something better, as if the life I'd built for us, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd poured into raising her, as if none of it was good enough. I see, I said quietly. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. No, Emma. I think you meant it exactly like that. I turned back to my appetizers, my hand steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. Tomorrow night was going to be very illuminating indeed. Friday turned into Saturday with Emma checking and rechecking every detail of our house like she was preparing for a military inspection. She rearranged the books on our shelves, replacing my romance novels and self-help books with volumes on architecture and interior design that she'd borrowed from the library. Where did you put my books? I asked, watching her shove the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People behind a potted plant. In my room. Just temporarily. She stepped back to survey her work. These look more intellectual. I picked up one of the architecture books and flipped through it. Emma, what if they ask me about sustainable building practices in modern residential design? They won't get that specific, she said dismissively, then paused. They won't, right? Before I could answer, her phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen, and she grabbed it like a lifeline. Hey baby. Are you guys almost here? Her voice pitched higher, more breathless than usual. Oh, they want to what? Tonight instead of tomorrow? My eyebrows shot up. Emma's face had gone pale. No, that's fine. We're totally ready. What time should we? Okay. Yes. I'll text you our address. Love you too. She hung up and stared at me with panic in her eyes. They're coming tonight. Derek's dad has an early meeting tomorrow, so they moved dinner up. They'll be here in 2 hours. 2 hours? I glanced at the clock. It was barely 4 p.m. That's plenty of time too. No, it's not. Emma was already running toward her room. I haven't done my hair, I need to change, the flowers I ordered won't be delivered until 7. She spun around suddenly. Oh God, Mom, what are we going to serve for dinner? I planned everything around going to Lou Bernardine tomorrow night. We don't have anything fancy enough. I walked calmly to our well-stocked pantry and started pulling out ingredients. Don't worry. I'll handle dinner. We can't just make spaghetti and meatballs. I wasn't planning to. I set out ingredients for coco vin, duck fat potatoes, and a chocolate souffle. Why don't you go get ready? I've got this. Emma stared at the ingredients I'd assembled. Mom, where did all this come from? We don't usually have duck fat and... Is that saffron? I picked up a few things this week. For the occasion. This stuff must have cost a fortune. Mom, please tell me you didn't blow your whole paycheck on. Emma, go get ready. Let me worry about dinner. She hesitated, then nodded and rushed off. I heard her on the phone immediately, probably calling Derek back to confirm details. As I started my prep work, my own phone buzzed with another text from Richard Blackwell. Asterisk change of plans. Derek insisted we move dinner up. Hope that's not an inconvenience. Patricia is bringing wine. Asterisk. I smiled and typed back. Asterisk no problem at all. Looking forward to it. Asterisk. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard Blackwell had no idea he'd been texting with me all week, coordinating what he thought were business meetings. He certainly didn't know that the property manager he'd been corresponding with about a potential investment opportunity and Emma's mysterious mother were the same person. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway an hour later, transformed. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, wearing the designer dress she'd charged to her credit card. Mom, this smells incredible. Where did you learn to cook like this? I didn't look up from whisking the souffle base. YouTube. Seriously? You'd be surprised what you can learn online. Among other places. She watched me work for a moment. Are you nervous? Meeting them, I mean? Not particularly. Really? Because I'm terrified. What if I say something wrong? What if they can tell I don't belong in their world? I finally looked at her, really looked at her. Under all that makeup and designer clothing, she was still my little girl, scared and desperate for approval. Emma, you belong anywhere you choose to belong. The question is whether you're being yourself when you get there. But what if myself isn't enough? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Emma's face went white. They're here, she whispered. Oh God, Mom, please don't mess this up. I untied my apron and smoothed down my navy dress, the one that had indeed come from Nordstrom, though Emma had no idea how many zeros were actually on the price tag. Don't worry, sweetheart, I said, walking toward the front door. I promise you, tonight is going to be unforgettable. I opened the door to find Derek standing with an older couple who looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for wealthy Connecticut parents. Richard Blackwell was tall and silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blazer. His wife Patricia was elegant in that effortless way that comes from never having to check price tags, her blonde bob styled to perfection. You must be Emma's mother, Patricia said, extending a manicured hand. I'm Patricia Blackwell, and this is my husband Richard. Please, call me Sarah, I said, shaking their hands warmly. It's so wonderful to finally meet you both. Derek speaks of you constantly. Richard's eyes met mine, and I caught the slightest flicker of confusion. He was trying to place me, I could see it in his expression. We'd met twice before, at property investment meetings, but he knew me by a different name in those contexts. Come in, please, I said, stepping aside. Emma's just finishing up in her room. As they entered, Patricia's eyes swept over our living room with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating real estate. I watched her take in the hardwood floors, the carefully selected furniture, the artwork on the walls. What a lovely home, she said, and I could hear the surprise in her voice. Derek mentioned you live in this neighborhood. The property values here have really skyrocketed, haven't they? Yes, it's been quite the investment, I replied casually. Richard was studying a particular painting, an original piece I'd purchased at auction last year. This is beautiful. Is it local? Actually, it's from a gallery in Soho. I couldn't resist when I saw it. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, and I watched Derek's face light up. Whatever else was wrong with this situation, the boy clearly adored my daughter. She floated down the stairs in her designer dress, every inch the sophisticated young woman she'd crafted herself to be. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell. I'm so excited you could make it, she gushed, accepting air kisses from Patricia and a warm hug from Richard. Emma, darling, you look absolutely stunning, Patricia said. And Derek, you didn't tell us your girlfriend's mother had such impeccable taste in art. Emma's smile flickered for just a moment. Oh, yes, Mom has always had an eye for pretty things. I excused myself to check on dinner, leaving them to chat in the living room. From the kitchen, I could hear Emma directing the conversation carefully away from anything too specific about our life, deflecting questions with the skill of a practiced politician. That's when I heard Richard's voice drop lower, speaking to Patricia in what he thought was a private whisper. There's something familiar about her. I swear I've met Emma's mother before. Don't be silly, Patricia whispered back. Derek said she works in property management. Very discreet, handles celebrity clients. You've probably seen her at some charity function. Emma's voice jumped in quickly. Mom consults for some very high-profile people. She can't really talk about her work much because of confidentiality agreements. I smiled to myself as I plated the appetizers. Emma was doubling down on her story, not knowing she was digging herself deeper into a hole she wouldn't be able to climb out of. Dinner's ready, I called, carrying the first course into our dining room. As they settled around the table, Richard continued to study my face. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. Patricia, meanwhile, was examining the place settings with obvious approval. Sarah, you must tell me where you found these dishes. They're exquisite. A little shop in the village, I said, pouring wine. The owner has wonderful taste. What I didn't mention was that the little shop was Tiffany & Company, and each place setting cost more than most people's monthly salary. The evening was about to get very interesting. The dinner conversation flowed smoothly at first, with Emma masterfully steering topics away from anything too personal. She spoke eloquently about her internship at the marketing firm, her plans after graduation, and her passion for sustainable fashion, something I'd never heard her mention before tonight. Emma tells us you work in luxury property management, Richard said, turning his attention to me as I served the main course. That must be fascinating work. It has its moments, I replied carefully, setting down his plate. I'm in real estate development myself, he continued, that puzzled look still flickering across his features. Mostly commercial properties, but I've been looking into some high-end residential opportunities lately. Perhaps we know some of the same people. Emma's fork froze halfway to her mouth. I could feel the panic radiating from her end of the table. It's possible, I said smoothly. Though as Emma mentioned, I tend to keep my professional and personal lives very separate. Of course, of course. Richard nodded, but he wasn't letting it go. Still, the property management world is relatively small, especially at the luxury level. What firm do you work with? The silence stretched for a heartbeat too long. Emma opened her mouth, probably to deflect again, but I beat her to it. Actually, I'm independent. I prefer the flexibility it offers. Independent luxury property management, Patricia mused. That's quite entrepreneurial. You must have built up quite a client base to make that sustainable. Emma was practically vibrating with anxiety now, cutting her food into increasingly smaller pieces without actually eating any of it. Mom's very selective about her clients, Emma interjected. Quality over quantity, right? I smiled at my daughter. Something like that. Derek, who'd been quietly enjoying his meal, looked up with interest. This is incredible, Mrs. I'm sorry, what should I call you? Sarah is fine. This is restaurant quality, Sarah. Did you train as a chef? Emma's laugh came out slightly strangled. Oh no, Mom just likes to cook as a hobby. She watches a lot of Food Network. Food Network, Patricia repeated slowly, her eyebrows raising slightly. This is Coco Vin with a 20-year port reduction, isn't it? That's hardly Rachel Ray territory. I nodded. I may have mentioned YouTube earlier, but I picked up techniques from various sources over the years. Various sources, Richard echoed, and something in his tone made Emma's eyes dart nervously between us. You know, Sarah, you remind me of someone I met recently. A property investor I've been working with on a potential development deal. Fascinating woman, really knew her stuff about market analysis and zoning regulations. My heart rate picked up slightly, but I kept my expression neutral. Real estate is a small world. Indeed it is. This woman, SM Chen, she had similar insights into luxury residential markets. Very sharp. Very familiar somehow. Emma had gone completely pale. I could see her trying to process why Derek's father was talking about someone with a different last name, someone who sounded far more sophisticated than the property manager she'd invented. Chen is a common name, I said quietly. True, Richard continued, his eyes never leaving my face. Though this particular SM Chen owns a rather impressive portfolio. Started with house flipping about 8 years ago and built it into a multi-million-dollar operation. Quite inspiring, really, a single mother who transformed herself from, what was it? He paused theatrically. From working as a housekeeper into one of the most successful independent property developers in the tri-state area. The fork slipped from Emma's fingers, clattering against her plate. Derek looked confused. Dad, why are you talking about some random businesswoman? But Richard wasn't done. Not random at all, son. You see, SM Chen and I have been corresponding for weeks about a potential partnership. We were supposed to meet Monday to finalize details on a $12 million residential development project. Emma's breathing had become shallow and rapid. She was staring at me with growing horror as the pieces began clicking into place. The funny thing is, Richard continued, a smile playing at his lips, when SM Chen texted me earlier to confirm our meeting, the message came from the same number that texted me tonight about dinner plans. Patricia set down her wine glass with a soft clink, her eyes widening as understanding dawned. Mom? Emma's voice came out as barely a whisper. What is he talking about? I met my daughter's eyes across the table, seeing my own features reflected back at me in her shocked expression. Well, I said calmly, I suppose it's time we talked about what I really do for a living. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face had gone from pale to ashen, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. I don't understand, she said, her voice barely audible. Mom, what is he talking about? SM Chen? That's not your name. Derek looked between his father and me, completely lost. Dad, what's going on? Why are you talking about business stuff? Patricia leaned forward, her expression sharp with interest. Richard, are you saying that Sarah is the property developer you've been working with? I took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of 8 years of secrets pressing against my chest. SM stands for Sarah Michelle. Chen is my maiden name. I use it for business. Emma's chair scraped against the floor as she pushed back from the table. Business? What business? Mom, you clean houses. You work for Sunshine Cleaning Services. You wear a uniform with your name embroidered on it. I do work for Sunshine Cleaning Services, I said carefully. 2 days a week. Tuesday and Thursday mornings. 2 days? Emma's voice cracked. But you leave every morning. You come home exhausted. You talk about Mrs. Henderson and the Martinezes and... I do clean for Mrs. Henderson on Tuesdays. The Martinezes on Thursdays. The other 3 days of the week, I inspect properties, meet with contractors, negotiate deals, and manage renovations on the 17 houses I currently own. Derek's jaw dropped. 17 houses? Richard was grinning now, clearly enjoying the revelation. Sarah, or should I say SM, has one of the most impressive portfolios I've encountered. Started small with a foreclosed property in Queens 8 years ago and built it into an empire. Emma stood up abruptly, her napkin falling to the floor. This is insane. Mom, if you have money, real money, then why do we live like we're barely scraping by? Why do you work as a housekeeper? Why do I have student loans when you could have just paid for college? The questions I'd been dreading for years, all tumbling out at once. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, standing there in her designer dress that she'd maxed out credit cards to buy, desperate to impress people with money she thought we didn't have. Because I wanted to see what kind of person you'd become, I said quietly. I wanted to know if you'd respect me for who I was, not what I could buy you. That's not fair. Emma's voice rose, drawing concerned looks from Derek and his parents. You lied to me. For years, you've been lying to me. I never lied, I said, standing to face her. I told you exactly what I do. I clean houses. I just didn't mention that I also buy them, renovate them, and sell them for profit. Patricia cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps we should give you some privacy to discuss this family matter. No, Emma said sharply, whirling to face them. Don't you see what she's done? She's been testing me like some kind of lab rat. Playing games while I stressed about money and worked 2 part-time jobs and worried about how we'd afford rent. Derek reached for Emma's hand. Babe, maybe we should calm down. She yanked away from him. Don't tell me to calm down. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I've been lying to you about my family's financial situation, worried your parents would think I wasn't good enough, and it turns out my mother is probably richer than your family. Richard's eyebrows shot up. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but she's certainly done well for herself. Emma laughed bitterly. This is perfect. Just perfect. So all those times I was embarrassed about your job, all those times I asked you not to mention what you do, all those times I felt ashamed. She trailed off, the full implications hitting her. All those times, I was watching my daughter choose status over substance, I said softly. Watching you become someone I didn't recognize. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage. You had no right, she whispered. You had no right to manipulate me like that. Emma. No. I'm done. I can't. I need air. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, leaving the four of us sitting in stunned silence around a table full of cooling gourmet food. Derek started to follow her, but the sound of her car starting in the driveway stopped him cold. The evening was far from over. Derek stood frozen in the doorway, keys jingling uselessly in his hand as Emma's taillights disappeared down our street. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush us all. Well, Patricia said after a long moment, reaching for her wine glass with admirable composure. That was unexpected. Derek turned back to us, his face a mixture of confusion and something that might have been betrayal. Mrs. Sarah. I don't understand what just happened here. I gestured toward the table. Please, sit down. Let me explain. Explain what? That my girlfriend's been lying to me for months? That you've been lying to her for years? Derek's voice cracked slightly. Emma was so worried about tonight, so stressed about us meeting because she thought you'd embarrass her, and it turns out she was the one. He couldn't finish the sentence, but I heard it anyway. She was the one who should have been embarrassed. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me with newfound respect mixed with concern. Sarah, I have to ask, why keep working as a housekeeper? I've seen your portfolio. You could retire comfortably tomorrow. I sank back into my chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 47 years. Because I needed to understand what kind of person I was raising. When Emma was 14, she started making comments about poor people, about how they just needed to work harder, make better choices. She'd see homeless individuals and suggest they should just get jobs. I realized I was failing as a parent. Derek's expression softened slightly. So you, what? Pretended to struggle to teach her empathy? I never pretended to struggle. We genuinely lived on my cleaning income while I reinvested every dollar from the property business. Emma had everything she needed but not everything she wanted. I thought if she understood what it meant to work for something, to respect all kinds of honest work. I trailed off, looking at the door Emma had stormed through. Clearly, my experiment failed. Patricia spoke up quietly. Did it fail, though? You saw exactly who your daughter is when she thinks you have no power, no status worth respecting. Isn't that valuable information? It's information I wish I didn't have, I admitted. Derek was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. This explains so much. Emma's always been weird about money, like, she'll spend $50 on face cream but panic about buying groceries. She's told me stories about your financial struggles that just never quite added up. What kind of stories? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. About you working multiple jobs, about choosing between heating bills and groceries, about her eating ramen for weeks because money was tight. Derek stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Were any of those true? My stomach dropped. We never went without heat or food. I've never worked more than 2 part-time cleaning jobs at once. And I've been buying groceries at Whole Foods for 3 years. Richard let out a low whistle. She's been fabricating poverty? The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Emma hadn't just been embarrassed by my job, she'd been using fictional financial struggles as a way to gain sympathy, to explain away why she couldn't keep up with Derek's lifestyle. She'd been mining imaginary hardship for social capital. Oh God, I whispered. Derek, has Emma ever asked you for money? For emergencies or family problems? The look on his face told me everything. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. How much? I asked quietly. It wasn't. I mean, she always paid me back eventually. Small amounts. A few hundred here and there for unexpected bills or when your hours got cut. Derek's voice grew smaller with each word. She said you were too proud to ask for help directly. The room started spinning slightly. My daughter hadn't just been lying about my job. She'd been running a long con on her boyfriend, using me as an unwitting accomplice in a story of financial hardship that simply didn't exist. And now she was gone, probably driving around town, planning her next move in what had become a very complicated game of truth and consequences. The front door opened 20 minutes later, and Emma walked back in like she was entering a business meeting. Her tears were gone, her makeup touched up, her spine steel straight. The transformation was so complete it sent chills down my arms. I've been thinking in the car, she announced, not looking at any of us directly. And I think we all need to take a step back and approach this rationally. Derek stood up immediately. Emma, thank God. Are you okay? We need to talk about. About what, exactly? She moved to the sideboard and poured herself a glass of wine with steady hands. About how my mother has been conducting some kind of psychological experiment on me for 8 years? Or about how she's made me look like a fool in front of your family? Emma, I started, but she held up one perfectly manicured finger. I'm not finished. She took a sip of wine and turned to face Richard and Patricia. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell, I owe you an apology. I've clearly been given some inaccurate information about my family's circumstances. I had no idea my mother was leading a double life. The way she said it made it sound like I was running drugs, not building a legitimate business. However, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger, I think we can all agree that honesty is important in relationships. Complete honesty. Something in her tone made my blood run cold. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Derek, sweetheart, remember when you asked me about my college expenses last month? About why I was working so many hours when financial aid should have covered everything? Derek nodded slowly, clearly not seeing where this was heading. Emma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, it turns out I don't actually need financial aid. Or those jobs. My mother's apparently been sitting on enough money to pay my tuition outright this entire time. She paused for effect. Just like your parents pay yours. Emma, what are you doing? I asked quietly. I'm being honest, Mother. Completely honest. For the first time in years. She turned back to Derek. So when I told you I understood what it was like to worry about money, to work for everything you have, to appreciate the value of a dollar, I was apparently as clueless as you are. Derek's face went pale. Emma, we're both just rich kids playing at understanding the real world, aren't we? The only difference is, you knew your family had money. I was kept in the dark about mine. Patricia set down her wine glass with a sharp click. Emma, dear, I think you might be oversimplifying. Am I? Emma's laugh had a brittle edge. Let me ask you something, Mrs. Blackwell. How would you feel if Richard had pretended to be a janitor for the first 25 years of your marriage to test your character? If you'd spent decades worried about retirement savings while he secretly owned half of Connecticut? The comparison was so wildly off base it took my breath away. Emma, that's not. Isn't it, though? She was warming up now, pacing the room like a lawyer making closing arguments. You've been lying to me about who we are, what we can afford, what my options were. Do you know how many opportunities one turned down because I thought we couldn't afford them? Study abroad programs, unpaid internships, networking events? Derek was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. But Emma, you could have done those things anyway. Your mom would have. Would have what? Broken character in her little experiment? Emma's voice rose. She was more committed to testing me than to actually helping me succeed. I felt like I was watching my daughter turn into a stranger in real time. Every word she spoke was technically accurate but twisted into something unrecognizable. The saddest part, Emma continued, is that I actually believed we were partners in struggling together. I thought I was being responsible, helping out, making sacrifices for our family. She looked directly at me. But you were never struggling at all, were you, Mom? You were just watching me struggle. Taking notes. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, I think this is perfect timing, Emma said, her smile turning razor-sharp. You wanted to know who my family really is? Well, now you know. We're exactly the kind of people who lie about everything important. The silence that followed Emma's declaration was suffocating. I watched my daughter stand there, chin raised in defiance, and realized she was doing exactly what I'd feared most. She was doubling down instead of reflecting. Derek broke the silence first, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma, what are you saying? That because your mom made some unconventional choices, your whole family is dishonest? Aren't we? Emma's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. I mean, let's examine the evidence. I've been telling you stories about our financial struggles that were apparently complete fiction. My mother's been running a secret business empire while wearing a sunshine cleaning uniform. We've both been lying to you for months. Those aren't the same thing at all, I said, standing up. Emma, you knew we weren't actually struggling. You've been in this house, eating the food I provided, seeing the bills get paid. Oh, please. Emma waved her hand dismissively. You're really going to gaslight me now? Tell me I should have magically known you were secretly wealthy? Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? Emma turned to her with that same brittle smile. Isn't this exactly what you came here to find out? Whether Derek's girlfriend comes from good family? She made air quotes around the words. Well, congratulations. You've discovered we come from a family where psychological manipulation is considered good parenting. Emma, stop. Derek's voice carried a warning I'd never heard before. You're being cruel. Cruel? Emma's eyes flashed. I'm being honest. For the first time in this relationship, I'm being completely honest about who my family really is. She gestured toward me. We're people who think lying is acceptable as long as you call it a life lesson. Richard was watching this unfold with the fascination of someone witnessing a car accident. Sarah, perhaps you could help us understand your perspective. Her perspective, Emma interrupted, is that she's somehow the victim here. That I failed her test instead of her failing as a parent. She turned back to me, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. Tell me, Mom, what exactly did you think would happen tonight? That I'd fall to my knees in gratitude? Apologize for not worshipping your secret success? I thought you might realize that you've spent years being ashamed of honest work. Honest work? Emma's voice cracked. You want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about how you let me apply for financial aid I didn't need. How you watched me stress about student loans while you had enough money sitting around to buy 17 houses. How you let me work retail jobs for spending money when you could have just helped. I was trying to teach you. You were trying to control me. The mask finally slipped, and I could see the real hurt underneath Emma's anger. You were so busy judging whether I was worthy of your secret fortune that you forgot to actually be my mother. Derek stepped closer to Emma, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. Don't, she said quietly. I need to think about everything. About what else has been a lie. The words hung in the air like smoke. I realized with growing horror that Emma wasn't just angry about the money, she was questioning everything about our relationship, everything I'd ever told her, everything we built together. Emma, I said desperately, sweetheart, please. Let's talk about this alone. Let me explain. Explain what? That you love me, but only if I pass your tests. That you'd rather watch me struggle than trust me with the truth? She grabbed her purse again. I'm going to stay at Derek's tonight. I need space from all of this. But when she looked at Derek, his expression had changed too. And I realized the evening was about to take another devastating turn. Derek took a step back from Emma, his expression shifting from concern to something colder. Actually, Emma, I think I need some space too. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma's confident facade cracked instantly. What do you mean? She asked, her voice suddenly small. I mean. Derek ran his hands through his hair, looking anywhere but at her face. I need to process everything that's happened tonight. Not just about your mom's business, but about us. Patricia and Richard exchanged glances. This was clearly not how they'd expected their evening to unfold. Derek, you're upset about my mother's lies, I get that. No, Emma. Derek's voice was quiet but firm. I'm upset about your lies. About the stories you've been telling me for months about your family's financial situation. About the money you borrowed from me for emergencies that apparently never existed. Emma's face went white. That's different. I didn't know. Didn't you? Derek challenged. Really? You live in a $500,000 house in one of the best neighborhoods in town. Your mom drives a 3-year-old Honda that she owns outright. You have designer clothes in your closet that you claimed were thrift store finds. Did you really not know, or did you just not want to know? The silence stretched between them. I could see Emma scrambling, trying to find words that would fix this, but she was trapped by the weight of her own deceptions. I was embarrassed, she finally whispered. About her job. About what people would think. So you made up stories about eating ramen for weeks? About choosing between groceries and heating bills? Emma, do you understand how manipulative that is? Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Son, perhaps this conversation should happen privately. No, Dad. I want Emma's mother to hear this too. Derek turned to face me directly. Sarah, I owe you an apology. Emma led me to believe you were struggling financially, barely making ends meet. I've been treating you like a charity case in my head, feeling sorry for your situation. It's been patronizing, hasn't it? The kindness in Derek's voice made my throat tight. You've always been respectful, Derek. But I've been pitying you. Emma made sure of that. He looked back at his girlfriend, and I could see genuine hurt in his eyes. How long were you planning to keep this up? The poor girlfriend act? It wasn't an act. Emma protested. I felt poor. I felt like I didn't belong in your world. So you invented a version of reality where you'd suffered enough to deserve sympathy? Patricia's voice was sharp. Emma, do you hear yourself? Emma whirled on her. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what it's like to feel like an outsider. Actually, I do. Patricia's calm tone stopped Emma mid-sentence. I grew up in a trailer park in Ohio. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. I know exactly what real financial struggle looks like. Her eyes were ice cold now. And what you described to Derek isn't struggle. It's performance art. The room fell silent except for the ticking of our grandfather clock. Emma looked like she'd been slapped. Derek shook his head slowly. I keep thinking about all the times you couldn't afford to join us for dinner, all the times you said your mom was working extra shifts to cover bills. I felt guilty for having money when you were supposedly going without. Do you know how that messed with my head? I never asked you to feel guilty. You didn't have to ask, Emma. That's what manipulation is. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Emma's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. And I realized that in trying to test my daughter's character, I'd created a situation that revealed far more than I'd ever wanted to know. Derek's words about manipulation seemed to break something open in Emma. She stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, before sinking into the nearest chair like a marionette with cut strings. I never meant. She started, then stopped. I just wanted to fit in with you. To not feel like some kind of imposter. But you made yourself into an imposter, Derek said, his voice gentler now but still firm. You turned your life into a lie instead of just being yourself. Richard leaned forward, his business instincts clearly kicking in. Emma, can I ask you something? When you told Derek these stories about financial hardship, what did you think would happen long term? Did you have an exit strategy? The question was so clinical, so practical, that it seemed to cut through Emma's emotional spiral. She looked up at him with something like surprise. I thought maybe after we graduated, after I got established in my career, it wouldn't matter anymore. Like I could just stop talking about it. Stop talking about years of supposed poverty? Patricia's eyebrow arched. Just pretend it never happened? People reinvent themselves all the time. Emma's voice rose defensively. Especially after college. I thought I could become the kind of person who belonged in your world naturally. Derek ran his hands over his face. Emma, you already belonged. I never cared about your background. I cared about you. But your parents would have loved you regardless, Richard interrupted. Do you think we haven't done our research? We knew Derek was serious about you. We looked into your family months ago. My blood ran cold. Emma's face went completely white. You what? I asked, my voice barely steady. Richard had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Standard background check. Nothing invasive, just public records. Property ownership, business filings, that sort of thing. He paused, looking between Emma and me. We knew about Assumption Properties. We knew about the house flipping business. We just couldn't figure out why Emma was telling Derek you were financially struggling when the public records showed otherwise. Emma made a sound like air being let out of a balloon. You knew? This whole time, you knew? We knew your mother was successful, Patricia said carefully. What we didn't know was whether you were aware of it. Tonight answered that question. Derek stared at his parents, then at Emma, then back at his parents. Wait. You knew Emma was lying and you didn't tell me? We thought perhaps there was some family complexity we didn't understand, Richard explained. Some reason for the discrepancy in stories. Some reason, Emma repeated hollowly. They thought there was some reasonable explanation for why I was lying about my entire life. The weight of the evening was settling on all of us now. What had started as a simple dinner had unraveled into something much more complicated. Emma's lies, my deceptions, Derek's hurt, his parents' knowledge, it was all tangled together in a way that felt impossible to unwind. I think, Patricia said quietly, we should probably head back to our hotel. Give everyone some time to process this evening. Derek nodded slowly. Yeah. I think yeah. Emma looked up sharply. Derek, please. Can we just talk? Alone? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the first real crack in their relationship. The doubt creeping in, the questions about what else might not be true. I need some time, Em. This is bigger than I thought it was. As the Blackwells gathered their things and Derek avoided Emma's desperate gaze, I realized that my 8-year experiment had just destroyed everything it was supposed to protect. After Derek and his parents left, Emma and I sat in our dining room surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be an impressive dinner. The cocoa van had gone cold, the wine glasses sat abandoned, and the silence between us felt like a living thing. Well, Emma said finally, her voice eerily calm. That went about as well as could be expected. I studied my daughter's face, trying to read the emotions flickering behind her eyes. The anger from earlier had been replaced by something harder to identify, a kind of calculating distance that made my stomach clench. Emma, we need to talk about what happened tonight. About the stories you've been telling Derek. About my lies, you mean? She picked up her wine glass and drained it in one gulp. Let's call them what they are, Mom. Just like we should call your 8-year psychological experiment what it is. That's not what this was. Wasn't it? Emma stood up abruptly and began clearing plates with sharp, aggressive movements. You wanted to see what kind of person I really was when I thought you had no power, no money, no status worth respecting. Mission accomplished. I watched her stack dishes with unnecessary force, the china clinking dangerously. Emma, please sit down. Let's talk through this rationally. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rationally? Like you rationally decided to let me apply for financial aid I didn't need? Like you rationally watched me stress about money for years while sitting on a fortune? I was trying to teach you values. No. Emma whirled around, her eyes flashing. You were trying to control me. To shape me into whatever version of a daughter you thought you deserved. She paused, her voice dropping to something more dangerous. But here's what you didn't count on, Mom. I learned things during your little test too. Something in her tone made my blood run cold. What do you mean? Emma smiled, and it was nothing like the sweet expression I remembered from her childhood. I mean, I learned exactly how to get what I want from people. How to present myself as sympathetic, how to craft stories that make people want to help me, how to make them feel guilty for having more than I do. Emma. You taught me that, Mom. Every time you came home exhausted from cleaning houses while secretly closing million-dollar property deals, you were showing me that image management is everything. That what people believe about you matters more than the truth. I felt like I was watching my worst fears come to life in real time. That's not what I was trying to teach you. But it's what I learned. Emma's voice was getting stronger now, more confident. And you know what? I'm good at it. Really good. Derek's not the first guy I've gotten money from with my sob stories about our financial struggles. The room started spinning. What are you talking about? College is expensive, Mom. Even with the financial aid I fraudulently qualified for. She emphasized the word fraudulently like she was savoring it. But there are so many generous guys out there who want to help a struggling girl get ahead. Study groups where I'd casually mention we might have our heat shut off. Group projects where I'd worry out loud about affording textbooks. I gripped the edge of the table. Emma, tell me you're not saying what I think you're saying. I'm saying I learned from the best. Her smile turned predatory. You showed me that lying is acceptable as long as you have good intentions. That manipulation is fine if you call it character building. So I built some character, Mom. Just maybe not the kind you were hoping for. My phone buzzed with a text message. With shaking hands, I glanced down to see Derek's name on the screen. Asterisk, I need to ask you something about Emma's finances. Can we meet tomorrow? Asterisk. Emma noticed my expression and her smile widened. Ah. Derek's starting to do math, isn't he? Wondering exactly how many emergencies I've had over the past year? How much money are we talking about, Emma? From Derek specifically? Maybe 3,000 over 8 months. But like I said, he wasn't the only one. She shrugged casually. College boys are so eager to be heroes. I stared at my daughter, this stranger wearing my child's face, and realized that my 8-year test hadn't just failed. It had created something monstrous. The magnitude of what Emma had just confessed hit me like a physical blow. I sank back into my chair, staring at this person who shared my DNA but felt like a complete stranger. Emma, do you hear yourself right now? You're talking about defrauding people. Multiple people. She shrugged, beginning to pace around the dining room with an energy that felt manic. I prefer to think of it as evening the playing field. All those rich kids with their trust funds and family connections, and there I was thinking we were barely scraping by. I was just redistributing wealth. You were stealing. Was I? Emma's eyes glittered with something that made my skin crawl. Because technically, I never asked anyone directly for money. I just shared my story. If they chose to help, that was their decision. I thought about Derek's hurt expression, the genuine care in his voice when he'd mentioned feeling guilty about his family's wealth while Emma was supposedly struggling. The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. How many people, Emma? Does it matter? They could all afford it. She stopped pacing and fixed me with a stare that was equal parts defiant and calculating. Besides, isn't this exactly what you wanted to see? How resourceful I could be when I thought we had nothing. This isn't resourcefulness, it's survival. Emma's voice turned cold. It's what happens when you raise a daughter to believe she's one missed paycheck away from disaster while secretly hoarding millions. Did you think I'd just accept poverty gracefully? Develop some kind of noble character through suffering you manufactured? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but the message made my blood freeze. Asterisk hi, this is Marcus from Emma's study group. I heard about her family's financial situation and wanted to help with her textbook expenses this semester. Could you call me? Asterisk? Emma noticed my expression and laughed. Oh, that's probably Marcus Chen from my economics class. Sweet guy. His parents own that chain of restaurants downtown. He's been very generous with loans he doesn't expect back. Emma, these people trusted you. These people pitted me. There's a difference. She grabbed her purse and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing her hair like we'd just finished discussing weekend plans instead of a web of financial manipulation. You taught me that people's perceptions are what matter, Mom. That how others see you determines your opportunities. That's not what Isn't it? She turned back to face me, and for a moment I saw something vulnerable flicker across her features. You think I didn't notice how differently people treated you when they thought you were just a housekeeper? How they talked down to you, dismissed you, acted like your opinions didn't matter. She had noticed. Of course she had. But then I'd see you at parent-teacher conferences, talking to my teachers with this quiet confidence, and I'd wonder where that came from. Or I'd catch you reading business journals and taking calls in your car before coming inside to complain about how tired you were from cleaning all day. Her voice grew harder. You taught me that image is everything. That truth is negotiable. That it's perfectly acceptable to let people believe whatever serves your purposes. Another text came through, this time from a name I recognized, Kevin, a boy Emma had dated briefly sophomore year. The preview was enough. Heard Em's family is still having money troubles. Jesus, Emma. How many people think we're destitute? Does it matter? You created this situation. She checked her watch like we were running late for something. The question now is what we're going to do about it. The way she said we sent ice through my veins. Emma wasn't done with her revelations, and I had the sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. What do you mean, what we're going to do about it? I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. Emma's smile turned razor sharp. Well, now that your secret's out, we have a choice. We can come clean about everything, my lies, your deception, the whole messy truth. Derek will probably never forgive me, his parents will think we're both fraudsters, and who knows how many other people I'll have to pay back. She paused, letting that sink in. Or, she continued, we can control the narrative. Present a united front. Poor Emma, victimized by her manipulative mother who hid the family's wealth and forced her daughter to live a lie. The audacity took my breath away. You want me to take the blame for your choices? Weren't they your choices, though? You set this whole thing in motion. Emma pulled out her phone and started typing. I could text Derek right now. Tell him I'm devastated to learn about your deception, that I had no idea we actually had money, that I'm as much a victim as he is. Emma, stop. Why? It's perfect. You wanted to test my character? Well, now I'm testing yours. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen. How far are you willing to go to protect the daughter you created? I stared at her, seeing myself reflected in her calculating eyes, and realized this was my moment of truth. Everything I'd done for 8 years had led to this instant, my daughter threatening to destroy what was left of our family unless I enabled her worst impulses. No, I said quietly. Emma's confidence faltered slightly. What? I said no. I stood up, feeling steadier than I had all evening. I won't be part of covering up what you've done. And I won't let you blame me for choices you made. Mom, think about this rationally. I am thinking rationally. For the first time in years. I walked to my purse and pulled out my phone. You're right about one thing, Emma. I did create this situation. I thought I was protecting you from becoming someone who only valued money and status, but instead I created someone who thinks manipulation and lies are acceptable tools. Emma's face went pale as I started dialing. Who are you calling? Derek. I'm going to tell him the truth, all of it. That I've been secretly wealthy while working as a housekeeper to try to teach you values. That you've been lying about our financial situation and taking money from people under false pretenses. That we both owe him and his family massive apologies. You can't. Emma lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. I can and I will. Then I'm going to help you contact every person you've taken money from and figure out how to pay them back. With what money? You said yourself we've been living on your cleaning income. With money from my business. The business you're so ashamed of. I met her eyes steadily. Emma, this is where it ends. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more tests. Just truth, consequences, and hopefully, if we're lucky, redemption. Emma stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something crack in her facade. The defiance crumbled, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. What if Derek never forgives me, she whispered. Then we'll deal with that too. Together. Honestly. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually being her mother instead of her judge. Derek answered on the second ring, and I began the hardest conversation of my life, one that would finally, truly, end both of our deceptions.